I don't think there's a family in the United States that hasn't been touched by the toxicity of drugs, mine included. And it is a scourge on our country, and I think many countries feel this. So we can eliminate a small percentage of the drug trade that is pouring into this country, then I think that's a good thing.
Don Bramer, former Bush official, former naval intelligence officer, and Bramer Group chairman, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report again.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be back today.
We've got to start with this news from Donald Trump. He's announced that he's ordered a blockade of all sanctioned Venezuelan oil tankers. So this means that ships that are already under US sanctions won't be allowed to enter or leave Venezuelan ports without the risk of being stopped by US forces. So here's what Trump wrote about it. He said, for the theft of our assets and many other reasons, including terrorism, drug smuggling, and human trafficking, the Venezuelan regime has been designated foreign terrorist organization. So, Don, can you run me through this major escalation of tension between the US and Venezuela? Because this is more of a military step as opposed to an economic one.
Well, it's a little bit of both, Maddie, because what it is, sanctions are already in place, which you mentioned. This is just an enforcement of those sanctions. And the bulk of the company or the entities that is sanctioned is an entity called PDVSA. That is a state-owned shipping company that manages and oversees the logistics and shipping of oil trade for Venezuela. Right now, if you look at oil trade in Venezuela, it's already down. They were, weeks ago, months ago, over $1 million a week, or 1 million barrels a week, excuse me. Now they're roughly about 300,000 barrels a week. So significantly dropped. This is putting a huge economic impact on Maduro, which levies a lot of the debt that he has with Russia and with China, and also his relationship with Cuba.
Part of Trump's post when he announced this read that Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be nothing like they've ever seen until such time as they return to the United States of America all the oil, land, and other assets that they've previously stolen from us. I mean, Don, what oil, land, and assets would the White House be referring to when it says that Venezuela stole it from the United States?
Well, this goes back to years ago when the Venezuelan government basically froze and stole U.S. assets. At one point, it was billions and billions of dollars of assets that was stolen by Venezuela towards U.S. companies that were working in the Venezuela region area.
For our audience, Venezuela's economy has significantly relied on its oil export. So around 88% of Venezuela's exports are coming from oil. So the US imports a small share of around 100 to 200,000 barrels per day, but most of Venezuela oil goes towards China. So do you think Trump's blockade will significantly hurt the country?
I don't think, as far as the citizens of Venezuela, honestly, I don't think you can hurt them much worse. It is sad when you have a country that has so many resources, that you have political leaders, military leaders living like royalty, but you have your own citizens and the people literally eating out of garbage cans to survive. That's what you see right now in Venezuela on a daily basis. And this was way before this blockade ever started. As far as talking about, the flotilla and the blockade that Trump, he loves his adjectives. He loves to, inflate this. But if going back, you look at 1988, 1989, very similar to what we saw with President H.W. Bush and Panama.
Susie Wiles was in an interview with Vanity Fair, and she said that President Trump wants U.S. forces to continue destroying small boats that the administration claims are used for drug smuggling until the Venezuelan president is forced from power. So the direct quote was that he wants to keep on blowing up boats until Maduro cries uncle. So, I mean, John, is this the goal for Trump? Because it really does contradict their official line, which is to combat drug smuggling.
Hey, the first thing I'll say about the war on drugs, it's a horrible issue. We have fentanyl from China that is being routed through Venezuela, up through South America. We have cocaine, other narcotics that are coming up the Caribbean Sea. I think just last week alone, we lost 8 students who overdosed in Providence, Rhode Island, just from one night and one party. I don't think there's a family in the United States that hasn't been touched by the toxicity of drugs, mine included. And it is a scourge on our country, and I think many countries feel this. So we can eliminate a small percentage of the drug trade that is pouring into this country, then I think that's a good thing. The other side of that is, Maduro is an illegitimate president. He legitimately stole the election on January 10th, and he's using drugs to funnel and to finance him. I'd say if you look at it, bottom line is he's making more off drugs than he is off oil.
Don, you spent years working in the US Navy, and we've seen Republicans divided over the Defense Department and Trump's decision to blow up these boats because of narco terrorism in the Caribbean. So, Senator Rand Paul, for example, called it extrajudicial killings. He was urging Pete Hegseth and others to prove that these were drug traffickers before killing people. So, what's your approach on this take from Trump? Do you think it's pushing it too far, though?
Well, history will always be the best judge of us. Senator Paul, he's not what you would lean towards as what we call a true Republican. He's very libertarian. He's very isolationist. So I'm not surprised that this would be the kind of rhetoric that comes out of this office. I think you have to do something. And if you look at what this country looks like for the past 4 years and the millions and millions of people who poured into our border that were porous, and now we've cut that down to, a mere 1% of what it was. Something has to be done. For example, you look at when they started doing the vetting of all the people that came across the country in the last few years, how many of those people actually are a risk to this country?
If the goal is to topple the Venezuelan regime, then do you think the US is on the verge of war with Venezuela?
I think war is a really bad word to use right now. The president has said, if we do land strikes, they will not just be Venezuelan. There will be Caribbean targets. There will be Colombian targets. Anybody that's in the business of narcotics, drug trade, drug logistics is a target. So, saying it's Venezuela, no, I think it's specifically drug trade right now. Now, that could change, but right now, let's focus on the narcotics.
But even with Donald Trump, talking about the hypothetical of land strikes, and even watching, members of the U.S. Navy and Pete Hegseth say direct, a full-on killing of these people in boats, can you still say that Donald Trump is anti-war?
I think Donald Trump is pro-life, pro-American life, pro-family, pro-children, and that's what he's trying to protect here. I've been to London. You can walk out some of these streets and you see people who are addicted to these drugs. I think that's what he's trying to prevent here. We've had a problem here for years. I can look outside and you see people who are sadly just addicted, walking around like zombies, just a block from the White House.
No, there's no denying that the US does have a problem with fentanyl, does have a problem with drugs coming in from Mexico and such. But it's more that, Don, was there a more diplomatic approach to go about it with governments in Latin America, or was it too far gone?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up because of all the drug strikes or the boat strikes we've seen. We hear people complaining about Venezuela, but all of our Caribbean partners up and down the coast, we've not heard them complain. It's almost like they're quietly cheering us on, but so there are no complaints we're hearing from other countries. So I think that this is an issue, but it's also when we talk about these strikes and the preparation for land strikes, when we're doing war gaming in Panama, when we're doing air patrols close to Venezuela, what that is, all very legal, and we're not invading any laws. We're not getting into Venezuela's airstrike or airspace. But what we're doing is we're sending a clear message that, Maduro, we're knocking on your door. Now's the time to listen. We've given you a chance to come sit at the table, have a sit-down talk, a negotiation, a compromise. He hasn't done that. The president has said that option is still open. So it's in Maduro's court. If he wants to have a conversation, he can still say this. But if not, then there's other alternatives.
Senator Mark Kelly, a retired naval officer, and 5 other Democrats who have all served in the military or the intelligence community, posted a video reminding US service members that they're allowed to disobey illegal orders. Now, they didn't exactly specify what they were talking about, but their message is reportedly aimed at the Trump administration's military action in Latin America. So in response to this video, Don, the Department of Defense launched an investigation into Mark Kelly, with the Pentagon considering recalling him to active duty so that he can face discipline under the military justice system. So this situation is clearly intensifying, but is it an abuse of power from Trump's Department of Defense to orchestrate this investigation after he told service members, like, look, you can disobey if you don't believe in it?
Well, once we, in the United States, we raise our right hand and we take an oath to the UCMJ, which is our code of military justice. Yes, you have the right to question and disobey unlawful orders, but realizing in doing so, when you do that, it does have ramifications. What I see here with Senator Kelly and the other senators, this is not anything more motivated than political fodder. I get hundreds and hundreds of emails a week from both sides, Democrat and Republican, asking for contributions. Ironically, right now, I've probably had 5 to 6 in the last 2 days from Senator Kelly and other colleagues of his using this as an opportunity to raise campaign cash. So let's call it is political fodder. They're using what the president's doing to raise money because going into 2026, they're going to need every dollar they can.
But you can understand, Don, that this is surely an unusual situation to reprimand a respected former Navy officer who served 25 years and has been a senator since 2020. We can admit that this is an unusual circumstance.
It is unusual, but I think we live in very unusual times. I think when you have political figures that tend to want to use social media, they want to use TV, Twitter, whatever you may call it, for political gain, for traction, and not do with the job they are elected to. That's the responsibility, and that's the consequences of your actions.
Well, I want to get your reaction to the way that Mark Kelly responded to this investigation. He said that it should send a shiver down the spine of every patriotic American that the President and Secretary of Defense would abuse their power to come after me or anyone in this way. So he said that the US has the most professional military in the world. I trust their integrity. What I don't trust is Pete Hegseth, a recklessly unqualified Secretary of Defense who has already shown me he will corrupt any process to make an example out of me and send a message to every veteran and every American that they shouldn't speak out. I mean, your reaction to this, Don, you are a retired naval officer. Do you look at the situation, especially Pete Hegseth's role? I mean, he's been in the role since January, and he has copped a lot of backlash. People have questioned his integrity. They've questioned his qualifications. What do you think about the situation?
Well, I mean, he's breaking the mold. And I'm not going to say I agree with everything, but I do agree with a lot that he has done because I think, our military had become one of the world's largest social experiments. And instead of being war fighters, we were trying to bend the rules. We were trying to be inclusive. We were letting people into the military who did not belong in the military, who take away the lethality. And we were having problems of recruitment, retention. People were quitting, they were leaving. And also, our armed services, every branch wasn't meeting its recruiting numbers for nearly 3 years. We have a waiting list now. We've had a waiting list since the beginning of the year. That's unprecedented that you have a turnaround that quick. So I think the youth of the country who want to serve, who want to fight, and who want to be part of this country, they like what they're saying because they didn't want to join something that wasn't about defending this country. It was more about being a social experiment.
Don, let's just move to Russia for a minute. Vladimir Putin, he's told Russia through a TV address, he said the goals of the special military operation will be achieved unconditionally. If Ukraine doesn't want to have a substantive discussion, then Russia will liberate its historical lands on the battlefield. So this doesn't sound like a president who wants peace, despite what Trump and Steve Witkoff would say. So Republican Congressman Don Bacon, he's responded to this and said that the US should send 200 long-range and extremely accurate cruise missiles to Ukraine. Maybe then Putin will get serious and seek peace. Putin started this war and he'll stop this war once he realizes he cannot win and that the cost of war is too high. So what are your thoughts on that, Don, this call from the Republican congressman to send cruise missiles to Ukraine after Putin has yet again showed us who he is?
Well, it's funny you bring up Congressman Bacon. He's been a dear friend. I was just with him the other night. He has long been a huge advocate for supporting Ukraine's military, for empowering them and giving them the tools they need to finish this. I think in this case, that's the only thing that's going to put open Putin's eyes. This compromise back and forth, this tit for tat, it's not going anywhere. We started with the 28-point plan. We're down to 19-point plan. Putin's economy, it's failing. He has completely just saturated and taken his resources and manpower. You look at how many young men lives have been lost. He's killed almost an entire generation. Um, I don't think he feels that right now. And I think if you look at history, what we saw in Afghanistan, in the late 70s and early 80s, it's kind of going to be when it cripples his economy completely is the only time he's going to actually, maybe say, "I'll go."
So do you think that Trump and the US administration needs to be putting more pressure on Putin and to be asking him to make more concessions? Because he said he's not making any concessions, especially on territory, but Ukraine has been asked to make several.
You know, I think that what the president and the administration is trying to do is more than about Ukraine. I think finding a peace, finding a resolution to this, is about security and long-term strategy for the entire European nation. Uh, you know, Sometimes I believe that Zelensky needs to rethink his stance. I understand where he's coming from, but it does take compromise. But also, Putin has to compromise, and I haven't seen that from him. I think sometimes he's like dangling the mouse in front of President Trump, and I don't think it's gonna, at some point, it's gonna tire up people's patience.
Don Bramer, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report.
Thank you.